So I guess like a useful place to start with is what are the common types of mental health conditions.
What do you think about the stigma? I mean, in terms of society mindset, like, oh, people crying for help.
Sometimes what I say, it takes a village to help one person. Just imagine. But I do have people who have crossover, meaning that they.
Hi, welcome to MaNa Talkshow. Where's the doctor? Over here we have our doctor, Jeremiah, and we have our founder for Flourish Happiness, Mr. Ismail. Right, today's topic is going to be a hot topic. What is it all about? It's going to be about mental health. Are you all ready? Okay, stay tuned. Okay, so first question that I have to actually let Dr. Jeremiah roll it out is, Doctor, what are the symptoms of mental health?
So I guess like a useful place to start with is what are the common types of mental health conditions we face in a primary care setting, right? So I think there's a spectrum of conditions of different types of presentations as well as severity of mental health conditions. I think the ones that we might be a bit more familiar with would be things like a low mood, which persists a bit longer. We might think of things like depression, anxiety disorders. Quite commonly, I see in my clinic also with things like eating disorders as well, not unusual, as well as sometimes people with sleep issues, so insomnia and substance use disorders. So these tend to be a bit more of the common ones that we do see in the clinic setting, at least in the primary care. Less commonly, we do see things like psychosis, things like personality disorders, but these are typically a bit more uncommon. But yeah, at least in the primary care settings, I think the things that we are interested in, at least in the scope of this talk, would be things like mood disorders, anxiety disorders, and maybe even things like eating disorders now.
I see. Thank you. So back to you, Mr. Ismail. What are the signs and symptoms that we all need to look out for? Is there any common signs, or it's not really? It's very subtle kind of signs out there.
I think what am I working with people with mental condition, and normally it's like their diet, and what mentioned by Dr. Jeremiah is that the mood swing. Sometimes we have low mood, sometimes we have high mood, and this is very common. I do it so much in my work with people with mental condition or with substance use disorder. I think looking at their diet, their sleep patterns, and how they go day by day. These are some simple things that we need to observe to be aware of what's going on with me.
So something like bipolar disorder, is it one of those categories? In sense?
No, I think bipolar is a different kind of level where bipolar and schizophrenia and clinical depression. One of the most common symptoms for these three is that, from my working with them, it's suicide is one of those things that is commonly.
Suicides, I see. So, Dr. Jeremiah, what are your thoughts of suicides? Is it a common thing to do with stress? What's the coping mechanisms out there that people can actually face with the world right now? The fast phase, yeah.
Right. As in suicidal ideations, I think it's a quite a severe manifestation of mental health conditions, right? And so we typically see patients start contemplating suicidal ideations when they've gone through some time of hopelessness and they haven't been able to find the resources or medical attention or professional attention for their underlying mental health comorbidities, right? And so then the manifestation comes about as things like suicidal ideations, right? So typically when I do see someone in the consult room who is articulating things like suicidal ideations, right? It's a worrisome thing to me, right? And it's a really like a cry for help, right? And so my job when they do articulate suicidal ideations is to kind of see how can I intervene, right? As a physician, do I need to put in some sort of protective measures to help them? Whether it's do I need to escalate the care to someone a bit more professional to kind of safeguard them in this space? Is it time to start certain medications? These
Mhm.
kinds of things, right? So it's quite a complex kind of maneuvering around patients with suicidal ideations, right? Because they are at risk, and we do know that people do eventually do carry out with these, and so we do have to be a bit careful and be a bit more diligent around them. Yeah.
So saying about all this, right, in a way when you're talking about they're asking for help. So in your view, when a person says that I need help, like or they say I'm just tired, I don't feel like doing anything, is it a sign that they're actually, down with depression? Is it a classic sign or it's not necessary?
So it's a bit. I think people with low mood, as in medicine, we do make differentiation between things like low mood and depression, or especially by clinical depression, right? And they range from things like the length of the symptoms, the duration of the symptoms, the severity of the symptoms. So to just put them all together, I usually would just describe them as mood conditions, right? Because they're different manifestations. So like bipolar, which you're talking about, for example, we would lump under together under like a mood kind of disorder as well, right? So without giving them like specific label, because when we say bipolar, there's very specific kind of definitions of it when we use those kinds of labels.
Mhm.
So in terms of like mood disorders, I think the common things we look out for, right, is some sort of deviation from the patient's usual baseline, right? So things like, they are feeling a lot more sad than usual. And when they're feeling that kind of sadness, they're breaking into tears all of a sudden, or they start ruminating about unhappy memories all of a sudden. They're finding it difficult to sleep. They're finding it difficult to enjoy things that they usually do. So maybe it's they like to eat like nice food, go out restaurants where they don't seem to do that anymore. Or they used to be able to go to work and pay attention and focus at work, and they can't do that anymore. So unable to do things that you could usually do before. Sleep is a very powerful indicator. People typically who have mood disorders either have very difficult time sleeping, or they sleep for quite much longer, and even when they wake up they're not feeling very refreshed, right? So these are the kind of things we look out for as well, right? Navigating relationships, right? So they might not be able to maintain healthy relationships when before they could, right? So they might be avoiding their partners or their parents or their family members, these kind of avoidance behaviors, or not interested in talking to these sorts of close relations. So these are the kinds of things to look out for the history. There's a lot of things we do look out the history. Appetite being the other one. There's a lot of things we do look at the history, but a lot of it is some sort of deviation from their usual baseline, right? Which, when you take it in isolation, like someone feeling a bit sad, yeah, it doesn't sound like a lot. But when you do take a much more full history, and you start picking out all these kind of different bits around here and there, then you start seeing, oh, maybe there's some sort of underlying mood disorder that's motivating all of this sorts of change in behaviors.
I see. So, Mr. Ismail, back to you. What do you think about the stigma? I mean, in terms of society mindset, like, oh, people crying for help, they are like, like commonly people say, oh, don't go near him or her and stuff like that. What do you think of that? Yeah.
I think before I answer that, I'd like to just add on what Dr. Jeremiah shared. I think one of the things that we need to observe is patterns,
Mm.
sleep, eat, and their hygiene.
Mhm.
And it's not just a one time off, he's moved down. It could be a series, it could be like days, weeks, and months.
Mhm.
So we need to observe the pattern, because patterns do not lie.
Mhm.
Because like sometimes we are happy every day, that's why we are down. Just one time off. Sometimes take a series of a week or two. And there's a period of time where there is a threshold we need to look into, because sometimes it's very delicate whether we know that this person is a normal kind of we have stress all the time. Singapore is like busy, bustling company, a country, where So back to the stigma thing, I think stigma is real. Stigma can happen not only with people with mental illness, it can be in any denomination as well. Ethnicity, the rich and the poor, the low income and the rich one. So stigma for mental health condition is more of a me, not you, the public or community, but not for me. I have this thing, and it is let's say I have a mental illness diagnosed, and sometimes I do not know what's happening with me. You know, over the years, then I realized that. Then the doctor told me, Ismail, you have this disorder. Automatically, is by nature, we just feel that, oops, do I want to share this with my family, with my friends? Because that is a stigma. Because stigma is the first thing it comes from me myself. It's shame to share with you, and less before to share with you how would you look at me then. So right now it's okay, but after I tell you this, I have disorder, and suddenly in my mind, he or she will spread out, hey, I think I have something, maybe, or we have all this kind of judgment and biases, assumption that this behavior is not, because if I don't tell whatever behavior I do this and that, they don't tell me, okay, this is, yeah. So these are the things where sometimes it's very tricky and it's very sad. The public still sees stigma is just put a chalk label on their head, say that. Very sad.
Yeah, so I think like navigating stigma in Singapore is especially challenging, right? I think when we look at mental health, stigma is entrenched in our society because of things like conservative values. I think it's also cultural in nature. I think there's specific cultural kind of reasons for the kind of opinions we have about mental health. And then I think it's also because like Singapore is a very stressful place to work in. It's very, I think one of the ideals of Singapore is for you to be a productive person, right? For you to be always very hardworking, right? And so a lot of stigma is associated when you're not being a productive person and people don't want to talk about it, right? I think just on a bigger layer, also mental health issues, a lot of people are able to mask it, right? And so when there's nothing to physically
Exactly,
show,
yes.
right? Then people can't be like, oh, then you're not really that sick, right? When often enough, when we take a history, we probe hard enough, you see the patient breaking down during our consults, right? And like I said, this also blends or leans into this idea of Singapore being very productive. Singaporeans being very productive people, right? Where they're able to hide a lot of these feelings in this pursuit of work, of income, of protecting their families, these kinds of things, right? So I think there are various things that are pushing this stigma element right there, and they're hard to navigate.
So, Dr. Jeremiah, once a patient is being diagnosed of having any form of mental illness, I understand that will all be recorded. So, in a way, will it affect them to actually to be out there to get back to the society once they're much better and all?
Having mental health issues.
Yes, I mean, especially they have seen a doctor and they're being diagnosed. So definitely they get certain kind of like assist with like certain medication or certain therapy and stuff like that. But will it affect their life to integrate back to the society later part of their life?
Well, as in, I think that's a complicated question to answer, right? And I think that depends on how well these mental health conditions are managed, right? So typically, if they're managed well and the patient's able to, might use this word function, right? Function is a very important word we use when we talk about mental health conditions, right? They're able to return to their functional capabilities. I don't see why there should be any issues with them reintegrating back into society.
Yeah, because especially the term stigma is there. So somehow will it actually affect them to integrate back to the society?
As in, I guess the idea of internalized stigma is what you're pointing towards, right? Well, that's our job as a physician and as a therapist, of helping the patient navigate through that experience, right? I think that's an inevitable part of having a mental health condition. Not even just mental health, but just health conditions in general. Like stigma is always going to be part of it, right? It's our job of helping them navigate through that.
So, Mr. Ismail, back to you. So, saying so, all there are many, many types of therapy out there and stuff like that. You want to care to share more what is actually workable for most patients out there, or I don't say patient, I will use clients with a better term to use to describe those people having mental issues when they come forward to see you and everything.
Yeah, one of the most common therapy that I employ is CBT. It's
Mm-hmm.
cognitive behavior therapy,
Mm-hmm.
and beside it, I will also apply positive psychology
Mm-hmm.
approach, where I would want to explore with them. It's not straight away when they come to me, I will tell them, okay, you have this thing. It's never me.
Mhm.
So it's more of getting to know them better and
Mhm.
how I will end up when they feel comfortable with me talking to me and they open up. And then from there, the journey will start. It will not start straight away, but it takes about 2-3 sessions getting to know them, sharing, right, what they have gone through. Once I have the trust in them, when they have the trust in me, when they come to me, is that they believe in me that I can help them. But then again, I'm not a god, but just a normal person. I do have my own uh, emotional challenges. So from there, I'll be able to work together, how we can come together and explore things.
So saying so, I can see that social support from your family, friends around is also very important, right?
It is very important. If they come to for me for help, but I think back home they are 24/7. With me only 1 hour. Back home 24/7. At work 8 hours.
Mhm.
So I think sometimes what I say, it takes a village to help one person. Just imagine. But I do have people who have crossover, meaning that they some of them are therapists themselves, counselors themselves, psychologists themselves, but they have gone through that moment when they are down, But I think stigma and it's the approach is getting to know them, then therapy. Therapy comes secondary for me. The primary goal is to understand them. Once you have the trust in them, then the trust that because to make things work, you have to be working with them. Yeah.
Okay, so what are your thoughts with the current context? Like this current generation, you'll say, okay, if I'm stressed or I'm burnout, I just go healing till the next morning. I don't go home. Or some choose to stay grounded in their room, never get out from their room. So when their parents or anyone call them, come, you haven't have your food or your meals. Leave me alone, that kind of thing. What are your thoughts on all that? Is it helpful for a person to do that in that manner to heal themselves till the next morning? Yep. Or something like that. Mm.
I think that is social isolation.
Mm-hmm.
I keep away from my family member.
Mm-hmm.
These are most very common when people have stress, even not that kind of clinical, but a normal like BGR, boy girl relationship, work stress when I come back home. How are you, Smart? I'm good. But back in the room, I just stand and wall, wall. So it is many of them out there, and we need to continue talking and having this conversation right we're having now, so that more conversation, more dialogue. The more we talk, the more we know and
So,
understand.
so basically, we need to be more empathy in a sense, right? I see. Okay, so back to you, Dr. Jeremiah. In your view, how patients are able to cope with this kind of situation? What kind of coping mechanisms out there? Yeah.
I think it's going to be dependent on the patient as well as the type of mental health condition they're facing as well as the severity, right? But I think like from a starting point, like useful kind of coping strategies to identify things that are stressing them out or triggering, right? And how can we like either eliminate it or kind of like minimize their interaction with these most stressful things, right? And so these sorts of things could be like, if work is a bit stressful, should we talk about taking some time off work, take a sabbatical, or should we explore finding another job, these kinds of things, right? I think that's one of the easiest things, or not actually easy, but the most straightforward things to do of identifying what are these triggers and how can we minimize these triggers, right? And then often enough, I think that leads to a good launching board for us to discuss other types of interventions. So things like whether we should use medications, whether things we want to use like CBT, motivational interviewing, these sorts of things, right, to help with the patient. But if the triggers are persistently there, then it's going to be a bit counterproductive for a lot of these interventions. While, because they're still there.
Yeah, thank you so much. So now it seems that the key point here is being empathy and listen to them to hear and understand them. So other than that, is there anything else apart from listening to them, understand them? Is there anything that you feel that is necessary for us to understand this group of people, these clients?
Well, I guess as a physician, um, what I would say to patients not to diminish their symptoms, right, or what they're feeling, right. I think there's always a certain kind of tendency for us to minimize our symptoms, and and to always just seek help. If there's some sort of mental health condition you're worried about, and there are very good ways for us to intervene and to help you.
Mhm. I see. So, Mr. Ismail, lastly from you, so what do you think on your end, right? The triggers that that actually can contribute to all these mental health issues. So, is there any coping mechanisms that we can look up to?
I think one of the things that we can do is to seek help
Mm-hmm.
if need be. I think but the first line of help is to seek medical.
Okay.
However, to reach there, I think the family members need to talk to the person
Mm-hmm.
with empathy, of course,
Mhm.
definitely, with love and care.
Mhm.
Empathy, love and care. These are the two: love and care, the most important things that
Mhm.
where the family member knows that my family care.
Mhm.
That is the most family first.
Family first. Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody.